Welcome back to the U.S. Navy History Podcast. I am Dale, and I'm joined by Christoph.
Hey, everyone. And hey, Dale. I guess you're part of everyone, so I probably didn't need to call you out specifically, but I will because I care about you.
Okay, I will take it. So today's episode brings us face to face with one of the most humbling and instructive encounters in modern naval history. An event that forced the world's most powerful navy to rethink some of its most basic assumptions about undersea warfare. Picture this. The year is 2005. The United States Navy's Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, USS Ronald Reagan, a $6 billion symbol of American sea power, is conducting exercises off the coast of Southern California. She's surrounded by her escort ships, destroyers, cruisers, and aircraft, all forming a protective shield against threats both above and below the surface. Then, out of the quiet Pacific depths, a small Swedish submarine appears on the scene. HMS Gotland, a diesel-electric boat costing roughly $100 million. No nuclear power, no towering size, no speed advantage, just silence and skill. In a stunning display of stealth and tactical patience, the Gotland reportedly slipped through the carrier's screen, lined up her target, and simulated multiple torpedo kills against the Ronald Reagan.
Oh, no.
Before vanishing undetected back into the deep. It wasn't just an exercise victory. It was a wake-up call. This episode explores how a relatively small air-independent propulsion submarine managed to expose critical gaps in U.S. anti-submarine warfare. Why the Navy responded by leasing the Gotland for 2 full years of training, and how this event reshaped undersea warfare strategy for the modern era. Because sometimes the most valuable lesson in power doesn't come from victory, but from defeat. So we're going to trace how the Gotland's quiet approach challenged an entire fleet, examine what made her so stealthy, and uncover how this single exercise off the coast of California still echoes through the halls of naval strategy today.
The Swedes, am I right? Gah! Just can't trust those guys. Or gals. Or both. I'm just kidding, Sweden. You're great. Thanks for helping us. Let's learn more about this exchange.
Let's get underway. It began like so many other pre-deployment workups. Routine, structured, and meant to sharpen the edge of a strike group before a long deployment. In early 2005, Carrier Strike Group 7, centered around the USS Ronald Reagan, was conducting exercises off the coast of Southern California. The Reagan herself was the pride of the U.S. Navy's modern fleet, a Nimitz-class supercarrier, nuclear-powered, displacing over 100,000 tons,
Wow.
with an air wing capable of projecting power across the globe. But this time, something different lurked in the Pacific waters of California. From halfway around the world came a small Swedish-built submarine, the HMS Gotland, a diesel-electric attack submarine equipped with a revolutionary technology known as air-independent propulsion, or AIP. At first glance, Gotland didn't look like much of a threat to a behemoth like the Reagan. She was small, under 65 meters long, crewed by just a handful of sailors. But her design philosophy was radical, one that prized silence over speed, patience over power, and deception over display. In the confines of the Baltic Sea, where she was designed to fight, stealth was survival. The Swedish Navy had spent decades mastering the art of littoral or near coastal submarine warfare. And their AIP system, using a closed cycle Stirling engine fed by liquid oxygen, allowed Gotland to remain submerged for days, even weeks, without surfacing to recharge her batteries.
Wow.
For the American fleet, accustomed to hunting noisier diesel boats or tracking high-speed nuclear submarines in deep water, this was a new kind of challenge. And then it happened. During the exercise, Gotland reportedly slipped past multiple destroyers, evaded active sonar sweeps, and positioned herself perfectly for attack. Within the exercise's rules of engagement, she simulated torpedo strikes, multiple hits against the Ronald Reagan. The carrier, theoretically, was sunk. No alarms, no explosions, just a message, silent but deafening, to the most powerful navy on Earth. Even the mightiest fleet is vulnerable if it forgets how to listen for silence. The exercise sent shockwaves through naval circles, but rather than dismiss the event as a fluke, the U.S. Navy did something extraordinary. They invited the Gotland to stay. In March of 2005, the United States and Sweden signed an agreement to lease the HMS Gotland and her Swedish crew for 2 full years. The submarine was transported to San Diego, where she would act as a full-time adversary, a sparring partner for American carrier groups, destroyers, and anti-submarine warfare aircraft. It was an unprecedented collaboration. The Swedish crew would operate under their own flag, conducting realistic training exercises with U.S. forces, giving American sailors and aviators the rare chance to train against one of the quietest submarines in the world. And so the Gotland began her second career, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. Her lessons were simple but profound: that silence is a weapon, that patience wins under the waves, and that the ocean still hides dangers no radar can see. The sinking of the Ronald Reagan wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a transformation, one that would reshape how the U.S. Navy thought about anti-submarine warfare, how it trained, and how it prepared for the next silent threat.
So this is a really interesting discussion. I think we had spoken last episode about battleships and if we should have something that punches hard or can take a punch also. And it's always interesting to me how we're trying to close the gaps. Every weapon that you make will have trade-offs. And you were talking about how the air wing could be deployed worldwide. It could face threats on the surface, above and below. Like, there's a lot of things that Ronald Reagan can do. Why did this one tiny little ship get past all the things that military minds and engineers and scientists have been designing the Ronald Reagan to defend against? And so I'm very curious to see how this goes. And kudos to the American military. Whenever you see something like this, that should be a red flag. It should get your attention, and that means it needs to be addressed. And when you ignore warning signs like this, that's basically how your enemies get a foothold. And so let's see what happens. Let's see what decisions are made. And I'm just curious how this all came to be.
Well, to understand how a small Swedish submarine humbled one of the most advanced navies in the world, we have to start with the heart of the Gotland herself, her silence. For over a century, the cat and mouse game between submarines and surface ships has revolved around one idea: who can hear whom first?
Mm-hmm.
In that game, Gotland was a master of silence. Let's break it down. The Gotland class submarine, designed in the 1990s by Kockums AB in Malmö, was the first operational submarine in the world to use Stirling engine air-independent propulsion, or AIP. That term, air-independent propulsion, sounds technical, but what it really means is freedom. Freedom from the surface. You see, most diesel-electric submarines are limited not by power, but by air. Their batteries can only run so long before they must surface, or at least raise a snorkel, to start their diesel engines and recharge. That snorkel exposes the sub to radar, infrared, and even visual detection. It's like waving a flag and saying, "Here I am!" But Gotland didn't have to do that. Instead of relying solely on diesel engines, her Stirling AIP system used liquid oxygen and diesel fuel to run closed-cycle engines underwater. Engines that could quietly generate electricity for days or even weeks without surfacing. It's not fast, it's not flashy, but it's silent. And underwater, silence kills. While a nuclear-powered submarine might sprint across the ocean at 30 knots, it's never truly quiet. Pumps, turbines, and coolant systems all produce detectable noise. The Gotland, on the other hand, could creep through the water almost noiselessly, moving at just a few knots. Every machine inside was shock-mounted, insulated, and engineered to minimize vibration. Even her propeller, a carefully designed sew-back 7-bladed screw, was optimized to avoid cavitation, which is the noisy bubble trails that could betray a sub's position.
Thank you for explaining that.
In technical terms, Gotland's acoustic signature, the sound she makes underwater, was barely above the ocean's natural background noise. For U.S. Navy sonar operators, that was like trying to pick out a whisper in the middle of a thunderstorm. Now, add geography to the equation. The exercises where Gotland earned her reputation took place in coastal waters, areas known as littorals. Littoral environments are messy, unpredictable, and full of acoustic interference. Layers of warm and cold water bend sound unpredictably. Shifting salinity, seabed composition, and surface clutter can all distort sonar returns. In short, it's sonar hell. That's the kind of environment Gotland was built for. Her designers had spent decades dealing with the Baltic Sea, a shallow, brackish, crowded body of water where sonar signals bounce, scatter, and vanish. In those conditions, the best defense isn't speed or depth, it's stealth. So when Gotland arrived off the coast of California, she brought the Baltic with her. Every tactic her crew had perfected in their home waters applied perfectly to the American coastline. Hugging temperature layers, drifting in silence, positioning in acoustic shadows behind seamounts and thermoclines. And when she moved, it wasn't random. Her crew knew exactly how to time each maneuver, waiting until the carrier group's own noise masked their movements. Destroyers, helicopters, and aircraft, all of them created sound. And in that ocean of man-made noise, Gotland was a ghost. A U.S. carrier strike group is a complex machine. Dozens of ships, aircrafts, and sensors work together to create overlapping zones of detection. But anti-submarine warfare, or ASW, is about probabilities, not guarantees. Every time a submarine dives deeper, or moves slower, or shifts under a layer, it changes the equation. The Americans had tools, powerful ones, towed arrays, dipping sonars, P-3 Orion patrol aircraft dropping sonar buoys, even helicopters sweeping with magnetic anomaly detectors. But finding a Gotland-class submarine wasn't about technology. It was about intuition, patience, and pattern recognition. And that's what caught the U.S. Navy off guard. After the end of the Cold War, the Navy's anti-submarine skills had dulled. The Soviet submarine threat was gone, and the focus had shifted to land wars in the Middle East. Years of counterterrorism and maritime security operations had pushed deep-sea ASW to the margins. When Gotland showed up, she was a living reminder of what the Navy had forgotten. That under the right conditions, even a small submarine could threaten a $6 billion warship. The encounter wasn't a humiliation, though. It was a wake-up call. And to the credit, the Navy didn't dismiss it. They leaned in. In the months after the 2005 exercise, reports circulated through the fleet. The Gotland had not only penetrated the Ronald Reagan's defensive screen, she had done it repeatedly, methodically, and under controlled exercise conditions designed to favor the defenders. That got the attention of everyone, from admirals to sonar technicians. So the Navy turned that shock into opportunity. They invited Gotland and her Swedish crew to stay in San Diego for 2 years. A rare, perhaps unprecedented move. During that time, the submarine became a kind of floating professor. American destroyers, carrier strike groups, and even submarines took turns hunting her and losing her. Each encounter taught them something new about the realities of fighting in the modern underwater environment. They learned to control their own noise, to manage sonar emissions, to coordinate aircraft and ship sensors more effectively, and, most importantly, to think like a submarine crew. Because as every submariner knows, success under the ocean isn't about strength, it's about patience. The Gotland's lesson was elegant in its simplicity. You can't fight what you can't find. And if the world's most advanced navy could lose track of a 70-foot Swedish diesel boat, imagine what could happen in a future conflict. In the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, or the Persian Gulf, where modern AIP submarines lurk in every depth layer and around every island chain. The ocean may be vast, but the quietest threats are always the closest.
So I have a couple of questions. I think you did a good job of explaining why the AIP-based sub is such a threat. How pervasive is this technology amongst different navies of the world? And why is it particularly, I think you may have answered this, but just to refresh myself and the audience, why is this so much more silent and stealthy than a nuclear sub? I thought one of the advantages of a nuclear submarine, for example, was that it could produce its own energy for a significant amount of time and wouldn't need to surface as frequently as a diesel, for example.
Well, to answer your first question, there are over 50 IP submarines in operation worldwide.
Wow.
With the largest operator being China.
Okay.
To answer your second, I am not a submariner.
Okay.
Or I am not a submariner.
Right.
I am not even close to being an expert in how submarines are operated and everything to that nature. But nuclear submarines are, what we're talking about here with the Gotland is, it is designed to operate in coastal, shallow waters.
Okay.
Our nuclear submarines are not.
Ah.
They're designed to operate in deep, vast open areas of ocean.
Right.
So the designs are completely different designs.
Makes sense.
And as I said earlier, the Gotland was designed from, bow to keel to sail to her screws for silence.
Well, that seems to be the main principle of the submarine, and I'm surprised that wasn't, I don't know, the basic design around which all submarines are made. But maybe they just gotten to the next level.
Well, I'm sure after this encounter, design changes were made to our nuclear submarines to make them more silent.
You said Sterling. Is that, as far as the engine type, is that a Rolls-Royce or is that just a random name? I just always associate it with that.
So a Stirling engine is a type of engine.
Okay.
It's a heat engine. So it's not named after the Rolls-Royce company engines. It's the type of engine it is.
Okay, cool.
Named after Robert Stirling, one of the fathers of hot air engines.
Nice.
When the Gotland first arrived in San Diego in 2005, most of the Navy's surface fleet had never encountered anything quite like her. A submarine that was not nuclear, not particularly large, not fast, yet nearly invisible. At first, the U.S. Navy treated the exercise as just another routine fleet test, another chance to sharpen old tactics, another reminder of why they were the best in the world. But when the Gotland sank the USS Ronald Reagan, not once, but repeatedly, the message was impossible to ignore. The Navy had just been handed a reality check by a diesel-powered boat from Sweden. And the admirals took notice. The U.S. Navy's reaction wasn't embarrassment. It was curiosity. What followed was one of the most valuable training collaborations in modern naval history. The Navy didn't send the Gotland home. They invited her to stay for 2 years. During that time, the submarine was effectively leased by the U.S. Navy under the Diesel Electric Submarine Initiative, or DESI, a little-known program designed to expose American sailors to conventional submarine attacks. But the Gotland was special. She wasn't just another diesel boat. She represented an entire generation of undersea warfare, one that didn't rely on reactors or endurance, but on silence and deception. So instead of being an adversary in a single war game, she became a teacher. The U.S. Navy positioned the Gotland as a training adversary for entire carrier strike groups, destroyers, cruisers, maritime patrol aircraft, and even U.S. nuclear submarines all took turns hunting her. Over the course of those exercises, the Navy rediscovered a muscle it hadn't used in decades: anti-submarine warfare in the real world. For context, the Cold War had been the golden age of anti-submarine warfare, ASW. The oceans had been full of Soviet submarines, from the Arctic to the Pacific. Every American destroyer and frigate had been trained to hunt them. But when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, that threat vanished. The Navy shifted its focus to carrier power projection, missile defense, and support for land operations. Submarine hunting, the art of tracking something you couldn't see, couldn't hear, and couldn't predict, became a secondary skill. By the early 2000s, many American ships no longer carried dedicated ASW officers. Entire training syllabi had grown outdated. The ocean had become quieter, or at least it seemed that way. The Gotland changed that overnight. To the U.S. Navy, the Swedish crew of Gotland represented an almost alien culture of stealth. Their tactics weren't just different, they were counterintuitive. Where American submarines rely on power, endurance, and deep ocean maneuvering, the Swedes lived and breathed the littorals. Shallow, noisy, unpredictable seas like the Baltic. Their doctrine was built around ambush, patience, and precision. When American ships tried to hunt the Gotland, the Swedes didn't run. They waited. They positioned themselves beneath thermoclines, layers of differing water temperature that bend sound waves and hide submarines from sonar. They moved only when the aircraft carrier's own escorts masked their noise, a tactic known as riding the baffles. They used the chaos of multiple sonar returns to their advantage. To an American radar operator or sonar technician, the Gotland didn't just disappear. She blended into the ocean itself. This was the real value of her time in San Diego. She reminded the Navy that technology alone doesn't win underwater. Tactics do.
Yep.
The lessons came quickly. Destroyer captains learned to listen differently. Helicopter pilots learned to time their dipping sonar sweeps more carefully, adjusting for the interference of layered thermals. Submarine crews relearned the importance of passive sonar, the art of listening instead of pinging. Even the engineers who designed ship hulls and propulsion systems began to think differently about acoustic signatures, the hidden sound fingerprints that every vessel carries. And perhaps most importantly, the Navy rediscovered something deeper: the importance of humility. For all of its technological dominance, for all of its nuclear power and carrier strike reach, the Navy learned that even a small, slow, diesel-powered submarine could threaten the heart of its global presence: the aircraft carrier. That was the kind of vulnerability the Navy hadn't faced since World War II. Admiral John Nathman, a former carrier commander, once described the Gotland experience as a wake-up call. It forced the Navy to rethink its entire approach to undersea defense. In response, new training centers were established. Old anti-submarine manuals were rewritten, and the Navy began reintroducing specialized ASW roles into its fleet. Programs like the Integrated Undersea Surveillance System were upgraded. Investments in quiet propulsion, advanced sonars, and unmanned undersea drones accelerated. And by 2010, new destroyers like the Arleigh-Burke Flight 11A variants were being fitted with improved sonar domes and towed arrays designed specifically for shallow water detection. The Navy even looked abroad, studying the growing fleets of advanced diesel-electric submarines in Europe and Asia, from Germany's Type 212A to Japan's Soru class. The Americans realized that the future undersea threat was not just nuclear. It was local, quiet, and clever. The legacy of the Gotland didn't stop with tactics. It influenced strategy. The U.S. Navy began integrating diesel-electric red teams into regular fleet exercises, simulated enemy submarines designed to mimic the kinds of threats America's carriers would face in contested waters like the South China Sea or the Arctic. And while the Gotland herself returned home to Sweden in 2007, the impact of her visit lingered long afterward. By the mid-2010s, the Navy had reestablished a culture of undersea vigilance, a recognition that the oceans, though vast, were never truly safe. In Pentagon circles, officers began using the term the Gotland effect. It referred to the moment a force that believed itself untouchable suddenly remembered that vulnerability breeds innovation, that humility became strength. The exercises with Gotland didn't prove that carriers were obsolete. Far from it. What they proved was that the naval warfare had entered a new era, one where stealth, speed, and sensor fusion mattered as much as firepower. The United States learned that you can't fight tomorrow's battles with yesterday's assumptions. So when the Navy invests billions in new sonar networks, unmanned undersea vehicles, and next-generation submarines like the Columbia class, the shadow of the Gotland is there, quietly influencing every decision. The Gotland never fired a real torpedo at an American ship. She didn't sink a carrier in battle, but she did something far more powerful. She changed how the world's greatest navy thinks about the ocean. In the end, her victory wasn't measured in kills. It was measured in lessons learned and in the awareness that even the smallest ripple can change the mightiest fleet.
I think this has been a really insightful lesson, and I'm very glad that the U.S. Navy is inviting such challenges. You know what I mean? To dogmatically presume how war is going to go, you've got it figured out, and what we're doing is going to work. It's that kind of hubris that loses wars. And to invite this Swedish vessel and team to counter them and then also accept the loss is the attitude that I'm glad that our Navy possesses. And I think just from a life perspective is something that I should adopt more often. Just kind of invite challenges to, why do I believe this? Why do I think this way? Or is this right? And not to prove myself superior or better like the Navy could have, but to find gaps and say, oh, you know what? I had not considered this. I need to consider this because this is going to be a big deal and I need to be ready. And so this whole posture, this whole activity that the Navy has undertaken is really encouraging to me, and I hope they continue. I think as technology advances, as nations kind of get more rambunctious, for lack of a better term, we need to be ready. And the better tools we have, the better tactics and strategy we have, the more prepared we will be to counter something like that. And that's heartening. You know what I mean? You want humble people, smart people, and decisive people in command that are willing to adjust so that the overarching goal of what we're trying to do is preserved, and that's nullify threats when we need to, but also protect the integrity of the seas effectively.
It has been said that the oceans of Earth's final battlefield, vast, unmarked, and invisible to most of us. For centuries, control of the seas has defined great powers. From wooden fleets in the age of sail to nuclear submarines prowling the deep. But in the 21st century, the rules of that control are changing. The lesson of the Gotland, the quiet reminder that even a small, clever submarine could outwit a $6 billion carrier, didn't end in 2007. It planted a seed. A question that still echoes across naval strategy rooms today. What happens when silence itself becomes the ultimate weapon? Welcome to the new era of naval warfare. The silent. This is not the grand naval duel of battleships and carriers. It's not even the Cold War's cat and mouse game between nuclear submarines. This is a world where diesel and electric boats, air-independent propulsion systems, and increasingly autonomous undersea drones blur the lines between hunter and hunted. Every navy, from the United States to Japan, from China to Sweden, is now investing in technologies designed to dominate this invisible realm. And the story that began with a small Swedish sub off the coast of California is now unfolding on a global scale. Let's begin with the technology that started it all. AIP, or air independent propulsion. In the 1990s, it was revolutionary. Stirling engines, fuel cells, and closed-cycle turbines allowed diesel submarines to stay submerged for weeks without surfacing.
Wow.
That meant they could move silently through contested waters, avoiding detection by radar, sonar, or satellites. Today, those technologies have evolved even further. Japan's new Taigai-class submarines use high-capacity lithium-ion batteries that can run silently for extended periods. No need to snorkel, no need to risk exposure. Germany's Type 212CD uses advanced hydrogen fuel cells capable of producing almost no detectable emissions. And countries like South Korea, India, and Australia are rapidly developing hybrid propulsion systems that blend with the best of both worlds: nuclear endurance and diesel stealth. The result? An ocean filled with ghosts. But technology alone isn't the only transformation underway. The next revolution is autonomy. Unmanned underwater vehicles, UUVs, are the new frontier of undersea warfare. Imagine a swarm of robotic submarines, each the size of a torpedo,
Whoa.
quietly mapping the seabed, tracking adversaries, and relaying data to command ships miles away. Some are already operational. The U.S. Navy's Orca XLUUV, built by Boeing, is a fully autonomous submarine capable of running long-range missions without a crew. China has its own program, the HSU-001, a drone designed to hunt in packs, carrying sensors and even small weapons. And in the near future, these machines could become the undersea equivalent of armed drones in the sky. Persistent, expendable, and networked together through artificial intelligence. It's a new kind of arms race, fought not for territory, but for information. Because whoever can see first beneath the waves wins.
Yep.
For the U.S. Navy, the challenge is adapting the power and prestige of its carrier fleet to this new environment. Carriers will remain essential, but they can no longer assume uncontested seas. Instead, they must operate as part of a layered, distributed defense network. P-8 Poseidon patrol aircraft scanning vast regions with advanced sonar buoys. MH-60R Seahawk helicopters dipping their sonar arrays in coordinated sweeps. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers using multi-static sonar systems to triangulate faint contacts. And below them, a shadow fleet of unmanned drones extending the Navy's reach into the abyss. This distributed approach turns the ocean into an interconnected web of sensor grid that can detect and track threats before they get close. It is the opposite of the Cold War's heavy concentration of power. It is flexible, data-driven, and adaptive. Still, there is a paradox at the heart of the silent war. The quieter the technology becomes, the harder it is to know who's truly out there. The harder it is to know what's truly out there. As submarines get stealthier and drones multiply, even the most advanced navies risk being blinded by their own complexity. And that uncertainty, that inability to see the enemy, is both a strategic danger and a philosophical one. Because when the battlefield is invisible, deterrence itself becomes fragile. For smaller nations, though, this new reality offers opportunity. Countries without nuclear submarines could now build fleets of highly adaptable AIP or battery-powered boats for a fraction of the cost. They can defend coastlines, deny access to larger powers, and change regional balances overnight. That's why you'll now find advanced AIP designs from Norway to Turkey, Singapore to Israel, each one designed to exploit the same advantage that the Gotland demonstrated: silence as power. And in this way, the lessons of 2005 continue to ripple outward, reshaping how navies think about control, deterrence, and vulnerability. So, what does the future hold? It will likely be a mix. Part manned, part unmanned. Part nuclear, part AIP. Part visible, part invisible. The seas will become more crowded, not less, filled with sensors, drones, submarines, and digital shadows of them all. And while aircraft carriers will still sail the world's ocean, their security will depend on the unseen war being waged beneath them. The same kind of war that began quietly 20 years ago, when a small Swedish submarine took on an American giant and won. In the end, the Gotland didn't just prove that a submarine could sink a carrier. It proved that innovation doesn't always come from size or cost, but from clarity, purpose, and the courage to rethink assumptions. That's the legacy of the Silent War. A reminder that beneath the calm surface of the ocean lies the most dynamic and consequential battlefield of our time. And as technology races forward, from AIP submarines to autonomous fleets, the question is no longer if these systems will define the next century of naval warfare, but how quietly they will do it.
I think that is a testament to clarity of purpose. Like, once you know what you're going after, the other pieces tend to fall in place. And if you're open, again, to being able to be corrected, you'll go a lot further than if you don't. I think we see that with the Ukrainian-Russian conflict at the moment, where you see drone development with explosives, and it is not expensive to make a drone. And it is a very effective fighting force, and you keep human lives, like the operators aren't in harm's way. You know what I mean? And so you have all these additional advantages. And when you were talking about how this, you could defend your shoreline or you could do all these things for cheaper, it just reminded me of the effectiveness and availability of chemical weapons. Once you figure out how to do that, it's devastating and cheap, and it can be trouble. Like, if every nation on Earth starts deploying these or investing in these, you're going to see a lot more conflict. And we may not have the death tolls, I guess, or the casualties from a direct conflict where it's just all manned or all people based, but I think there will be a lot more friction because people will have these weapons and want to assert themselves. Present company excluded, not you, Dale.
Oh, okay. When we think of the U.S. Navy, we often imagine its towering aircraft carriers, floating cities of steel carrying thousands of sailors, and an entire air wing of aircraft. Symbols of power, reach, and resilience. But the story we explore today reminds us that even the most powerful machines in history can be humbled, not by force, but by silence. In 2005, a small Swedish submarine named HMS Gotland rewrote the playbook of undersea warfare. It showed that innovation isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers from the deep. For the sailors aboard the USS Ronald Reagan that day, the lesson wasn't humiliation. It was revelation. They saw firsthand how the oceans had no respect for size, rank, or reputation. It respects only one thing: the quiet mastery of its environment. The U.S. Navy took that lesson to heart. By leasing the Gotland for 2 years, the Navy turned defeat into discovery, transforming a tactical surprise into a strategic advantage. Those exercises didn't just sharpen skills, they reshaped doctrine, rewired training, and reignited a culture of respect for the undersea threat. And in the decades since, that same humility has become the foundation of progress. Because in warfare, as in life, the strongest institutions are the ones willing to learn, adapt, and evolve. If you listen closely to the modern Navy, in the hum of a destroyer's engines, in the sonar ping of a helicopter searching the depths, you can still hear the echoes of Gotland's lesson. You can hear the sound of awareness. The understanding that in the age of digital warfare and artificial intelligence, the ocean remains the ultimate equalizer. Vast, cold, and mercilessly. And for every billion-dollar carrier that sails its surface, there's a silent shadow moving beneath, patient, unseen, and waiting. But perhaps the truest mark of mastery at sea, not dominance, but balance, not arrogance, but readiness, and not the pursuit of invisibility, but the pursuit of understanding. Because the moment we forget that, the moment we take the silence for granted, the ocean will remind us who's really in control.
Yeah, I don't mess around with the ocean, frankly. But of course, I'm not the Navy guy here. I do know it's merciless and vast, and I've seen enough stories where if you get stranded, it's tough to find somebody in the middle of the ocean. It's just a humongous place. Again, the lessons from this episode are clear to me, and I'm glad the U.S. is adopting them. Like focus of purpose, ability to learn, constantly sharpening the blade and honing what your function is so you can be better at it. And I think these are lessons we can all just adopt into our personal lives. What are we doing? Why are we doing them? How can we be better? That is the mark of excellence, and I'm glad to see that in our fighting force.
We're going to honor one of our fallen angels, like we do at the end of every episode, with the help of HeroCards.us. Today we want to honor Sergeant Major James G. Ryan Sartor. His hometown was Teague, Texas. Served with the U.S. Army, 2nd Battalion, 10th Special Forces Group, Airborne, Green Beret. He received 5 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart.
Gosh.
His date of sacrifice was July 13th, 2019. Killed in action, Faryab Province, Afghanistan. He was 40. A career soldier born and raised in Teague, Texas, James G. Ryan Sartor graduated from Teague High School in 1997, where he was a standout football player. He answered the call to serve and joined the Army in June of 2001 as an infantryman in the 3rd Infantry Division, where he was quickly deployed to help lead the invasion of Iraq in 2002. After his first combat deployment, Sartor continued to advance in his military career, being selected for the Special Forces Qualification Course, where he earned his Green Beret, and was assigned to A Company, 2nd Battalion, 10th Special Forces Group, Airborne, in Fort Carson, Colorado. He served there for the next 14 years, where fellow soldiers described Sergeant Major Sartor as a leader who led with muddy boots. As a Special Forces Green Beret, he was deployed numerous times, including operations in Iraq in 2006, 2007, 2009, and 2010-11, Germany and Israel in 2008, Africa in 2012 and 2013, and Afghanistan in 2017 and 2019. During the war in Afghanistan, U.S. Army Special Forces were often positioned at the front lines, accompanying Afghan Special Operations Forces on combat operations. According to a U.S. Department of Defense release, Sergeant Major Sartor died from injuries inflicted by enemy small arms fire during combat operations in Faryab Province, Afghanistan. Ryan was a beloved warrior who epitomized the quiet professional, said Colonel Brian R. Rayoun, commander of the 10th Special Forces Group. He led his soldiers from the front. Sergeant Major James G. Ryan Sartor received more than 24 awards and decorations, including 5 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart. So, Sergeant Major James G. Ryan Sartor, we thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Christoph, get us out of here.
You got it, Dale. Well, hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. You've made it to the end. Congratulations. As always, I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. And it's cool to do this together, and we're very happy that you're here. If there is something that was mentioned in the episode, or it triggered some memory, or, hey, I used to build these Sterling engines, you can let us know, and we would love to talk about that. You can contact us in a couple of different ways. You can email us at usnavyhistorypodcast@gmail.com. Alternatively, you can catch us on X Twitter. The handle is at USNHistoryPod. And we also have a Discord server that you can join for free. And when you get on there, you can chat with like-minded individuals about the Navy, technology, history, all the stuff we talk about. Me and Dale are on there too. And so, yeah, also rate and review, tell a friend. If you like what you're hearing, share it with someone that you think would also like it. It really helps us, and I think it might help them too. Win-win. So, then you'll get a better Christmas present probably because you're so cool. Anyway, thank you again, and we hope to catch you next time.
And with that, we're going to wish you guys fair winds and following seas. Goodbye.
Bye.